I know DJ's mom said he got his. Where is DJ? He's still sleeping, I guess. Okay. All right, here we go. Chapter 2. Here we go. For a time that he could not understand, Brian could do nothing. Even after his mind began working and he could see what had happened, he could do nothing. It was as if his hands and arms were lead. Then he looked for ways for it not to have happened. Be asleep, his mind screamed at the pilot. Just be asleep, and your eyes will open now, and your hands will take the controls, and your feet will move to the pedals. But it did not happen. The pilot did not move, except that his head rolled on a neck, impossibly loose, as the plane hit a small bit of turbulence. The plane. Somehow the plane was still flying. Seconds had passed, nearly a minute, and the plane flew on as if nothing had happened. And he had to do something. He had to do something, but he didn't know what. Help. He had to help. He stretched one hand toward the pilot, saw that his fingers were trembling, and touched the pilot on the chest. He did not know what to do. He knew there were procedures that you could do mouth to mouth on victims of heart attacks and push their chests, CPR or something, but he did not know how to do it, and in any case could not do it with the pilot who was sitting up in the seat and still strapped in with the seatbelt. So he touched the pilot with the tips of his fingers, touched him on the chest, and could feel nothing, no heartbeat, no rise and fall of breathing, which meant the pilot was almost certainly dead. Please, Brian said, but did not know what or who to ask. Please. The plane lurched again, hit more turbulence, and Brian felt the nose drop. It did not dive, but the nose went down slightly, and the down angle increased the speed. And he knew that at this angle, this slight angle down, he would immediately fly into the trees. He could see them ahead on the horizon, where before he could only see sky. He had to fly somehow. He had to fly the plane. He had to help himself. The pilot was gone beyond anything he could do. He had to try and fly the plane. He turned back in the seat, facing the front, and put his hands, still trembling, on the control wheel, his feet gently on the rudder pedals. You pulled back on the stick to race the plane. He knew that from reading. You always pulled back on the wheel. So he gave it a tug, and it slid back toward him easily, too easily. The plane, with the increased speed from the tilt down, swooped eagerly up and drove Brian's stomach down. He pushed the wheel back in, went too far this time, and the plane's nose went below the horizon, and the engine speed increased with the shallow dive. So he was kind of like barely going down, and he pulled it way up, then he pushed it back down. So he's kind of like this, which totally not good. Yeah. And so you know how, like, have you guys ridden a roller coaster or something and you feel your stomach like actually kind of like drop because
I feel like on the Joker at Six Flags.
There you go. Yeah.
All your body weight is going up to your chest.
Okay. So he pulled back again, more gently this time, and the nose floated up again. Too far, but not as violently as before. Then down a bit too much and up again very easily, and the front of the engine cowling settled. When he had aimed at the horizon and it seemed to be steady, he held the wheel where it was, let out his breath, which he had been holding all this time, and tried to think what to do next. It was a clear blue sky day with fluffy bits of clouds here and there, and he looked out the window for a moment, hoping to see something, a town or village, but there was nothing. Just the green of the trees, endless green, and lakes scattered more and more thickly as the plane flew where? He was flying, but he did not know where, had no idea where he was going. He looked at the dashboard of the plane, studied the dials, and hoped to get some help, hoped to find a compass, but it was all so confusing, a jumble of numbers and lights. One lighted display in the top center of the dashboard said the number 342. Another next to it said 22. Down beneath, there were dials with lines that seemed to indicate what the wings were doing, tipping or moving. And one dial with a needle pointing to the number 70, which he only thought might be the altimeter. Do you guys remember from that slideshow yesterday what the altimeter tells us? Zeke, what does the altimeter tell us?
Altitude, so how high or low. And I have
altitude, how high or low? And Zeke's question.
So I think, well, yesterday I thought that Brian could fly the plane, he'd get a hang of it. But the thing is, I think he'll have a huge problem landing.
All right, so Zeke's thoughts. Could you guys hear Zeke at all? Okay. Zeke's thoughts are that he thinks as long as he's just kind of holding steady in the air, Brian's going to be fine and be able to handle the up and down and whatever. But when it's time to land, that's when there's going to be a problem.
Where is he gonna land?
Just like
Where is he going to land? He's flying over what? What is he flying over? Trees and forest right now. Hang on, there's a lot of talking. It's hard for me to hear. Fiona.
I have a little prediction on what might happen. So I think that when he's flying over this forest, they might just start losing altitude and start running out of gas. And then when he winds up falling into the ground, I think he might just wind up finding a good patch of like a field, but then he'll be stuck in the middle of a little island.
Okay. All right. Jason, thoughts, predictions?
I think if, like Fiona said, if he runs out of gas, he could just like kind of glide it where he needs to kind of go.
All right. So Jason says, yeah, he's probably just going to stay how he is until he runs out of gas, and then maybe he can just glide down. Josie agrees with Fiona. Kane says, I've read the book. I can't guess. Sean, what's your thoughts?
So, when the pilot was still alive, he taught him how to fly the plane in the co-pilot seat, but the pilot was still in the pilot seat, and he was flying.
Yeah, Brian.
He thought he was helping him, but then he let off the pedal and the wheel, and he was flying by himself, but he didn't know, so how would he know how to fly?
Right. The pilot taught him how to fly, but not really. He literally just like held it for like a moment. And so so he doesn't know like fully all the controls or everything. He literally just like kept them steady for a minute. So yeah, he doesn't know much about flying the plane. But if all he has to do is keep it straight, hello again. All he has to do is keep it straight. He's figured that out. He did the up, down, up, down, up, down. And he finally figured out, okay, we've got it kind of level. But Fiona, Jason, you're right. He's probably going to keep it like that for as long as possible. But a plane takes gas. Macy, thoughts?
Okay, if it takes gas, it'll probably be going, and it'll go past the land and into the water. What happens if it crashes in the water?
What happens if he crashes in the water?
But that would be better, kind of.
Jason thinks it'll be better to crash in the water?
There's no easy way out because he has a hatchet just to break the window.
Hatchet to break the window to get out. Okay. Zeke, thoughts?
So I think, no, honestly, I think like a plane that small usually doesn't have to stop for gas before it goes to its destination. So I honestly think that we'll have enough gas to go to Canada. But because Canada, New York is decently close to Canada. You just go straight up. But,
All right, so hang on, because I can't hear you. So Zeke is saying he remembers that he was flying from New York to Canada, and New York borders Canada, so they're pretty close to his destination, and so he thinks he probably has enough gas to get to his destination. Lily's waving her hand furiously. But he doesn't know his destination. Remember, he's never been to his dad's house before. This is his first time flying, and I'm just guessing flying. If you've flown and you've ever looked out the window of a plane, it doesn't look like it does when you're driving on the ground. You don't see the same landmarks or anything, like you're way too high up. So it's not like you're like, I'm driving down the road and I'm in front of Walmart and then there's the McDonald's on my left and then Tyrama's on my right. Like, it doesn't look like that. You just see like the tops of trees and stuff come up there. So for him to see his destination, it might be difficult. Sophie, thoughts? She's fine. Zeke, more thoughts? Okay. Zeke says a crash is going to be horrible either way, but he thinks that a crash on land would be better because if you crash and go underwater, he's not going to be able to open the doors because the pressure of the water would be too much. Jason's still going to hold on. He's got the hatchet. There's a reason we've got this hatchet. The story's named Hatchet. He can break out a window if he goes underwater. Okay?
The undercurrents would suck it.
Undercurrents. Okay? I guess that depends on what kind of water he would crash in. Oh, she's going to fly to the ocean.
Wait, I got stuck in a current on a lake.
I'm sorry. I got stuck in a current in a river.
I got stuck.
Okay, Lily says, what if he's in a river? There's a current in a river. Sean says that he was in a big lake that had a little bit of a current. A big lake, I guess, could have some wind and things, but like a small pond. Well, a small pond wouldn't be big enough to crash in. Okay, so let's find out who's right or wrong, because some of you are like teetering on the edge of very close to right. All right. Okay. Where am I? Okay. Slightly to the left and below the altimeter, he saw a small rectangular panel with a lighted dial and 2 knobs. His eyes had passed over it 2 or 3 times before he saw what was written in tiny letters on top of the panel. Transmitter 221. You want to see the reactions? Kane says he wants to watch you guys so you can see the reactions. Me reading isn't interesting. Okay. Good call, Kane, for those of you that know what's coming. All right. Transmitter 221 was stamped in the metal and it hit him. Finally. That this was the radio. The radio! Of course, he had to use the radio. When the pilot had been hit that way, he couldn't bring himself to say the pilot was dead, couldn't think of it. He had been trying to use the radio. Brian looked at the pilot. The headset was still on his head, turned sideways a bit from his jamming back into the seat, and the microphone switch was clipped into his belt. Brian had to get the headset from the pilot, had to reach over and get the headset from the pilot, or he would not be able to use the radio to call for help. He had to reach over. Ugh. His hands began trembling again. He did not want to touch the pilot, did not want to reach for him, but he had to get the radio. He lifted his hands from the wheel just slightly and held them, waiting to see what would happen. The plane flew on normally, smoothly. All right, he thought, now to do this thing. He turned and reached for the headset, slid it from the pilot's head, one eye on the plane, waiting for it to dive. The headset came easily, but the microphone switch at the pilot's belt was jammed in, and he had to pull to get it loose. When he pulled, his elbow bumped the wheel and pushed it in, and the plane started down in another shallow dive. Brian grabbed the wheel and pulled it back too hard again, and the plane went through another series of stomach-wrenching swoops up and down before he could get it under control. When things had settled again, he pulled at the mic cord once more, and at last jerked the cord free. It took him another second or 2 to place the headset on his own head and position the small microphone tube in front of his mouth. He had seen the pilot use it, had seen him depress the switch at his belt, so Brian pushed the switch in and blew into the mic. He heard the sound of his breath in the headset. Hello? Is there anybody listening on this? Hello? He repeated it 2 or 3 times and then waited, but heard nothing except his own breathing. Panic came then. He had been afraid, had been stopped with the terror of what was happening, but now panic came, and he began to scream into the microphone, scream over and over, help! Somebody help me! I'm in this plane and I don't know. And he started crying with the screams, crying and slamming his hands against the wheel of the plane, causing it to jerk down, then back up. But again, he heard nothing but the sound of his own sobs in the microphone, his own screams mocking him, coming back into his tears. The microphone awareness cut into him. He had used a CB radio in his uncle's pickup once. You had to turn the mic switch off to hear anybody else. He reached to his belt and released the switch. For a second, all he heard was the whoosh of the empty airwaves. Then through the noise and static, he heard a voice. Whoever is calling on this radio net, I repeat, release your mic switch. You are covering me. You are covering me. Over. It stopped and Brian hit his mic switch. I hear you. This is me. He released the switch. Roger, I have you now. The voice was very faint and breaking up. Please state your difficulty and location and say over to signal end of the transmission. Over. Please state my difficulty, Brian thought. Gosh, my difficulty? I'm in a plane with a pilot who's had a heart attack or something. He can't fly and I don't know how to fly. Help me, help. He turned his mic off without ending transmission properly. There was a moment's hesitation before the answer. Your signal is breaking up, and I lost most of it. Understand, pilot, you can't fly, correct? Over. Brian could barely hear him now. Heard mostly noise and static. That's right, I can't fly. The plane is flying now, but I don't know how much longer. Over. Lost signal. Your location, please. Flight number, location, I don't know my flight number or location. I don't know anything. I told you that. Over. He waited, but there was nothing. Once for a second, he thought he heard a break in the noise, some part of a word, but it could have been static. 2, 3 minutes, 10 minutes, the plane roared, and Brian listened but heard no one. Then he hit the switch again. I do not know the flight number. My name is Brian Robinson, and we left Hampton, New York, heading for the Canadian oil fields to visit my father. And I do not know how to fly an airplane, and the pilot... He let go of the mic. His voice was starting to rattle, and he felt as if he might start screaming at any second. He took a deep breath. If there is anybody listening who can help me fly a plane, please answer. Again, he released the mic, but heard nothing but the hissing of noise in the headset. After half an hour of listening and repeating the cry for help, he tore the headset off in frustration and threw it to the floor. It all seemed so hopeless. Even if he did get somebody, what could anybody do? Tell him to be careful? All so hopeless. I'm going to pause. Zeke, yes, sir.
Well, I don't think if he was actually smart enough, he would have turned around so he could get the connection.
Yeah. If he was actually smart enough.
All right, so Zeke says if Brian was thinking clearly, he could have turned the plane around and headed back towards where there was a stronger connection. That honestly was something that went through my mind as well. As soon as he started the connection, he should have started turning around.
He don't know how to fly it. That's what he's
Right now, he knows how to go up and down. I don't know if turning is
Remember the pilot turned him to
the pedals. All right, so
rudder pedals and the wheel. Remember when
the pilot told him rudder pedals and the wheel.
Left and right.
Okay.
But he was confused about all that. Remember?
No, he wasn't.
All right. Well, either way, he didn't turn around. Sean.
Even if he couldn't fly, shouldn't there be an instruction manual or
There should always be instruction manual. All right. So let's talk about that. My car has an instruction manual in the dash, in the glove box in the dash, right? I would assume that 99% of you have a car instruction manual. The car instruction manual is this thick. Hang on, you guys get it's huge. And if it's way easier for somebody to just be like, hey, do this. I can tell you in my 41 years on this earth, minus 16. So what is that? 25 years of driving. Never have I ever read a car instruction manual. I have consulted it 1 or 2 times when there was a light that came on my dash and I'm like, ooh, what's that light? Something is wrong. And I looked up to see what that light meant. But yeah, it would be probably.
But we have the internet now.
Have the internet now. Okay, Brian doesn't have a phone or an internet. And also, the car instruction manual has a lot of things that are specific to that car. How to work the radio in that car, how to work what all the little lights and the dials mean, and how to work specific things in that car. And so each car is slightly different. It's still the same basic controls: gas pedal, brake pedal, steering, whatever.
Radio, but it's a little bit different.
But every car is a little bit different. And if you drive a different car, the brake pedal sometimes is a little bit touchier. So if I drive somebody's car I'm not used to and hit the brakes on what I'm used to in my car, sometimes we brake way more suddenly, or we brake not enough. And I'm like, oh gosh, we're going to crash. Right. So there's still a little bit that you wouldn't know. And does he have time to read a whole instruction manual that teaches you what every dial of a plane means?
Good.
But
You have to be one heck of a quick learner. All right. Zeke.
Time between he runs out of gas and he loses all that.
Does he know where the gas gauge is?
Does he know where the gas gauge is? Don't know. Hasn't mentioned it yet. Jason.
remember that repair kit?
I don't remember a repair kit. I remember a survival kit.
Yeah. So So if he crashed, then he has that is bad.
So if he crashes, he has the survival kit. Okay,
Probably.
that's a good thought.
Usually it's bad.
Usually,
All right, Macy knows something.
Okay, so what if he has a parachute?
What if there's a parachute in the survival kit?
Um,
Good thoughts. All right.
I know what's usually in those. Those like one grenade kind of things that
A
like
flare
you,
gun?
kind of like a flare gun, but like it sends out a lot of smoke.
Okay, so like Jason said, he thinks there's probably a flare gun
Kind of like that.
in the survival kit.
There's usually it's like
Put
colors.
this on.
like flares in it.
Guesses are getting a little
And
good.
there's maybe going.
Yeah. Too bad. All right, we got to continue. Sean, one more thing, and then we're going to continue.
in the survival kit, shouldn't there be like a fire starter and stuff?
Okay, so in the survival kit, should there be a fire starter?
Yes, there's a striker that you.
Like a thing that you can strike with? Yeah, that would be
Steel.
flint and
Yeah.
steel. All right. All good ideas. Oh, these are such good ideas, friends. I can't wait. Kane, I can't wait to see their expression either. Can't wait. All right, turning it back. Except that I've read this book before. A couple people have already read this book. I read it like when I was your age, and then we read this one last year.
Miss Delp read it to us.
I don't think it happens in chapter 2 though. I don't think we're going to get to the big reveal today. Okay. I think it's chapter 3. I think tomorrow's where.
Josie
I think he's just in the air for today.
in her hand.
Could be wrong. Josie, yes ma'am.
What page is it? The book closed.
Oh, we're on page 20. 20 in my book. What page are you guys on?
20.
20, okay. Okay,
21.
21. We're at the top of 21. All so hopeless. He tried to figure out the dials again. He thought he might know which was speed. It was a lighted number that read 160. But he didn't know if that was actual miles an hour or kilometers, or if it just meant how fast the plane was moving through the air and not over the ground. He knew airspeed was different from ground speed, but not by how much. Parts of books he'd read about flying came to him. How wings worked, how the propeller pulled the plane through the sky, simple things that wouldn't help him now. Nothing could help him now. An hour passed. He picked up the headset and tried again. It was, he knew, in the end, all he had. But there was no answer. He felt like a prisoner, kept in a small cell that was hurtling through the sky at what he thought to be 160 miles per hour, heading, he didn't know where, just heading somewhere until, there it was. Until what? Until he ran out of fuel. When the plane ran out of fuel, it would go down, period. Or he could pull the throttle out and make it go down now. He had seen the pilot push the throttle to increase speed. If he pulled the throttle back out, the engine would slow down and the plane would go down. Those were his choices. He could wait for the plane to run out of gas and fall, or he could push the throttle in and make it happen sooner. If he waited for the plane to run out of fuel, he would go farther, but he did not know which way he was moving. When the pilot had jerked, he had moved the plane, but Brian could not remember how much or if it had come back to its original course. Since he did not know the original course anyway and could only guess at which display might be the compass, the one reading 342, he did not know where he had been or where he was going. So it didn't make much difference if he went down now or waited. Everything in him rebelled against stopping the engine and falling now. He had a vague feeling that he was wrong to keep heading as the plane was heading, a feeling that he might be going off in the wrong direction. But he could not bring himself to stop the engine and fall. Now he was safe, or safer than if he went down. The plane was flying, he was still breathing. When the engine stopped, he would go down. So he left the plane running, holding altitude, and kept trying the radio. He worked out a system. Every 10 minutes, by the small clock built into the dashboard, he tried the radio with a simple message. I need help. Is there anybody listening to me? In the times between transmissions, he tried to prepare himself for what he knew was coming. When he ran out of fuel, the plane would start down. He guessed that without the propeller pulling, he would have to push the nose down to keep the plane flying. He thought he may have read that somewhere, or it just came to him. Either way, it made sense. He would have to push the nose down to keep flying speed. And then just before he hit, he would have to pull the nose back up to slow the plane as much as possible. It all made sense. Glide down, then slow the plane and hit. Hit. He would have to find a clearing as he went down. The problem with that was he hadn't seen one clearing since they'd started flying over the forest. Some swamps, but they had trees scattered through them. No roads, no trails, no clearings, just the lakes. And it came to him that he would have to use a lake for landing.
He didn't even have a water.
If he went down in the trees, he was certain to die. The trees would tear the plane to pieces as it went into them. He would have to come down in a lake. No, on the edge of a lake. He would have to come down near the edge of a lake and try to slow the plane as much as possible just before he hit the water. Easy to say, he thought, hard to do. Easy say, hard do. Easy say, hard do. It became a chant that beat with the engine. Easy say, hard do. Impossible to do. He repeated the radio call 17 times at the 10-minute intervals, working on what he would do between transmissions. Once more, he reached over to the pilot and touched him on the face, but the skin was cold, hard cold, death cold, and Brian turned back to the dashboard. He did what he could, tightened his seatbelt, positioned himself, rehearsed mentally again and again what his procedure should be. When the plane ran out of gas, he should hold the nose down and head for the nearest lake and try to fly the plane kind of onto the water. That's how he thought of it, kind of fly the plane onto the water. And just before it hit, he should pull back on the wheel and slow the plane down to reduce the impact. Over and over, his mind ran the picture of how it would go. The plane running out of gas, flying the plane onto the water, the crash. From pictures he'd seen on television, he tried to visualize it. He tried to be ready. But between the 17th and 18th radio transmissions, without a warning, the engine coughed, roared violently for a second, and died. There was a sudden silence cut only by the sound of the windmilling propeller and the wind past the cockpit. Brian pushed the nose of the plane down and threw up. Why did he throw up?
No, I don't have to.
He's nervous.
Nervous. Why is he nervous?
He could be playing.
Maggie.
Oh, I can't say no.
Macy, why is he nervous?
He playing sick.
He's plane sick?
No.
No. He isn't ready.
He thinks he's gonna die.
He thinks he's going to die?
He thinks he's about to fall to his death.
He thinks he's about to fall to his death? Yeah, I think it would make you definitely pretty nervous.
What if his plane doesn't land?
He could possibly pass out on his way down.
He could even pass out from being so scared and nervous. You could.
He needs to land by the rivers just in case if they have a inflatable raft.
Okay, Sean's like hoping that there's an inflatable raft or something in this survival pack. That survival pack is going to be so important. Okay. All right. Today, instead of you doing, we're going to do the front side together, the questions about the story together, and then you guys are going to do the back, which is predicting on your own. Okay. So for front and back, let's go over these questions together. And you guys can just raise your hands. Okay, so the first one is, what was the response? So when Brian tried to communicate over the radio and he first did get a response, what kind of response was it? Sean?
Tell us your.
Can we turn our book like?
Tell us your.
Tell us your location.
Tell us your location
And flight.
and flight number. Lily? Yeah. Tell us location and flight number. But did Brian have that information?
A plane could already be flying. And it
Okay. What were the two choices Brian figured that he had as he was sitting there in the plane? What were those two choices he felt like he had?
The crash Like to land it really by himself. No, go down immediately or like.
All right, the two choices. Brian's two choices. He decided were to wait till it ran out of gas
Or just crash.
or go ahead and take it down early. Okay?
Well, I would take it
And
down
where
early.
did Brian end up deciding was the best place to land?
I would take it down early because it would have gas there. It needs to go back up again.
Zeke said he thinks he would have taken it down early because he still would have had fuel. So if he miscalculated going down, he could have brought it back up more.
And Sam said you can use the gas to start fire.
And Sam said he could have used the gas to start a fire. However, if you have too much gas in the plane when you crash, what could happen? Explode. We don't want that to happen.
And then
That's another.
you can
reason-
use the battery.
That's
Okay.
another reason why I said that's a good idea.
But the
To land
battery
in water
doesn't
because it
explode.
wouldn't explode.
Okay, so if you land in water, would the explosion happen?
Yes. There wouldn't be any fire.
Yes,
There might not be fire because you would be underwater. Even if for a split second there might be fire above water, but as the plane sinks, that fire would extinguish.
And if there was an explosion, that would kind of help him because it would push him up out of the water.
But then the fire would just.
Well, he would be
That
really
kill
hurt.
him.
Okay, all right. So where did Brian decide would be the best place to land?
On the edge of
Clear area.
In a clear area.
On the edge of the lake.
Josie, yes ma'am.
On the edge of a lake.
On the edge of a lake. Very good.
What number are we on?
That was number 3. All right. Number 4. What did the airplane do that made Brian realize he had to land the plane right then? Do what? The engine died. Why did the engine die?
Because it was out of fuel.
Out of fuel. The engine died because it was finally out of fuel. All right. All right. Make some predictions now. So now on your own, flip this over, and it gives you some different details. Brian being troubled by the secret. How is this going to affect the story? Make a prediction on how Brian and the secret is going to affect the story. Brian's angry at his parents about the divorce. How is this going to affect the story? Make a prediction. Those things don't seem very important right now.
It might make him want to run away. It might make him want to run away. Like.
Okay, so make some predictions. How might that affect him? Now, here's the deal. Let's make a big prediction. This plane's about to go down, right?
He's gonna die.
We're only in chapter 2.
He has to stay alive.
He's going to stay alive, Zeke predicts.
I know what's gonna happen.
So good.
I know.
This book is so good, you guys. I can't wait. I wish we could just sit and just read the book today.
I know.
I love this book so much. There's so much good that happens. Okay. So when you are filling out these predictions, predict using everything that we know so far, which isn't much. This is only chapter 2. But what do you think is going to happen based on what we know? Make your predictions. And for you guys, I will see you then at 9 for math. Turn in your predictions when you are done with those. And I will see you guys in a little bit.
Bye.
Okay. Bye, guys. All right.